Hello everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today I am privileged to be joined by Rabbi Avrohom Asher Makovsky, author of a fantastic new book titled Living Chesed. Thank you, Rabbi Makovsky, for being here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
It's a special nachas ruach for me because we're good friends. So to see my good friend put out a book, and a book that really I followed the process from before it was even a book, when it was just an idea, is a tremendous source of satisfaction. I must say, I'm proud of what you produced here, because it's a fantastic book. The book is a Kiddush Hashem, and it's an inspiration. It's going to inspire people to do Chesed and to live Chesed.
All right. I'm making believe I'm not on a video here. Am I allowed to praise you? But you are the power behind this book, because when you gave me the first idea, put the stories in writing on Chesed, put the shiurim in writing. I was like, an English book. It didn't I didn't take it serious.
Right.
But the more you kept on telling me what a good idea it is, so the more started penetrating.
So the viewers may not know that you are a Mechaber Svarim. You've written Svarim in Hebrew, but you started giving shiurim in English on the topic of Chesed, shiurim that I heard, and I was very, very taken by them. And whoever hasn't heard them, they should take advantage and listen to your shiurim that you have on Chesed, because they're extremely inspiring. They all have a story with a lesson. And the reason why I pushed you to write the book, and thank you for the opportunity that you gave me also to write the foreword to the book.
I felt, the book wouldn't have happened without you.
But I felt that this book, I felt that Klal Yisrael needed this book, because we have books on many, many different topics. And the topic of Chesed, the way you teach it, the way you taught me, was so penetrating and so powerful. I felt that you had to share it, and this book is magnificent.
Okay. I find one of the real fundamental mistakes that people make, and I'm not saying I probably made that mistake too many years ago, and that is that when people say you have to really do a lot of chesed. So a lot of chesed means you got to take chunks of time away from yourself, away from your family, and start giving up hours of chesed, like a Hatzalah member or a Bikur Chaylim member or big organizations. And people say, listen, Baruch Hashem, I have a family to take care of. Hashem put me in a situation now that I just can't be spending hours doing chesed. So really that is a fundamental mistake, like we've discussed many times. That's one of the opening things I say in any shir I say on chesed. That chesed means the Peli Yoetz, like you've heard from me before, and I've quoted
the Peli Yoetz dozens of times. Right. Please share it with the viewers.
Okay, the Peli Yoetz that says that when it comes before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, people are looking for schusim. They're like looking high and low. So he says some people will pay a lot of money to do psichas hahechel by ne'ilah. By ne'ilah, to open up the Aron Kodesh, people pay a lot of money. Some people will buy mafter yaina for a lot of money because it's a skula. Some people pay money for Kalana Arim or Chasam Torah, Chasam Bereshis. People are looking for schusim. In his days, he says, people paid money for sandikois. To be a sandik, it's unbelievable. The Peli Yoetz says, 1 second. To give someone change of a coin is greater than opening the Aron Kodesh by Ne'ilah. Because it's a mitzvah in the Torah of Chesed. That means if someone needs change, and the mitzvah of Chesed is whatever you would want someone to do to you, do to someone else.
Right.
So if you're standing by a coffee machine that says exact change only, and you don't have change of $1, right, so you wouldn't want someone to change it for you. So to change someone else is a mitzvah d'oraisa of Chesed, greater than opening the Aron Kodesh B'Ne'ilah. So like Peli Yoetz is saying, any type of favor you do, you're driving home from work, you give someone a lift. You just did a mitzvah d'oraisa of Chesed. Any type of favor you do, so the opportunities are endless.
And you bring in the book one of the wonderful chapters where you bring a story from Rav Shach. And I love that chapter because it talks about how a yeshiva is a repository of chesed opportunities. A bacher came to Rav Shach, he said, I don't really get to do chesed in yeshiva. He wanted to know if he could go out of yeshiva, I don't know if it was to play music in an old age home, right? And do chesed in that fashion. And Rav Shach's response was, You don't have to go anywhere. The chesed is under your nose. Just look around yourself. And he talks about uplifting fellow bachrim. Some people are down and out. A yeshiva is a great opportunity. You're around people. You could do so much chesed.
Right. So this is the thing that, we're having a candid conversation here, but it's something every time I talk about chesed, I cannot control myself from saying over this Rambam, this earth-shattering Rambam. You know that I've said this in many speeches, and I used to get phone calls. Where is this Rambam? So after that, now I always say where it is. It's in Hilchos Deis, Perek Vav, Halacha Gimel, Chapter 6, Law 3, that you can look up the Rambam. That the Rambam says the ultimate way to be Mekayim, fulfill the mitzvah in the Torah of Chesed, is to give someone a compliment, to uplift them. And the answer is simple. The explanation of the Rambam is because whatever you would like someone to do to you, you do to someone else. The greatest desire a person has is that people think good of them. That's the greatest desire, what they have. So if that's the greatest desire that you have, so the greatest way to fulfill chesed is to compliment. So now let's go back where we started before. Someone is busy, they have no time, they're busy with their family, they're in work from 9 to 5, then they go home. How many times a day can they fulfill the ultimate way of the mitzvah of chesed?
Right.
You compliment your employee, you compliment your employer, you compliment your co-worker, you tell your wife you're a great mother when you come home, you tell your children you did such a nice job on your homework, you just were Mekayim 6 mitzvah deraises of chesed. Right. Without going into any organization, just sitting in your house.
Really is unbelievable. That Rambam, l'saper b'shvacha
of your friend.
Right.
And that's
right.
So this is very similar to that story with Rav Shach.
Right.
It's very, very similar, but it's building up, giving friendship to people.
And it's interesting, you really bring that out in story after story, how small acts of kindness, a nice word, a small gesture could really be life-changing. Besides, like you're saying, that you're being Mekayim, a mitzvah da'iraisa. And I've said this over when I've spoken to Bachram quite a few times. I always say over that example. If there's a fellow across the base marriage and you passed him a Gemara that he needed, your act is a mitzvah da'iraisa that's greater than if you got mafta yon on Yom Kippur. And the Bachram's eyes jump out of their head. They can't fathom it because we're so programmed to think we have like our priorities. What's more important? What's more chashuv? So I gave someone change for a soda machine. That's chashuv.
That's on par with...
that's on par with something so exalted.
Right. And I want to add to what you just said. You just said that if you pass a Gemara to your friend, you're Mekayim mitzvah deraisa because you did a favor for him. And if you tell your friend, you said a geschmack pshat in the Rashba, that is the greatest chesed. The Rambam is saying that's the epitome of chesed, is to compliment your friend. I mean, it's almost like tragic. That's the words we used in the book. That's almost tragic to overlook that. That means you come home from at night, you tell your wife, you are a great cook, you keep a great house, you're a great person, you will fulfill 3 times the mitzvah derais of chesed in the best way.
And I love that you brought up that example because we always say charity begins at home. Chesed begins at home also.
That's right.
Chesed can be manifest in your house. People don't realize that there's chesed with your spouse and your children also. Just because they're related to you doesn't mean it's not a mitzvah when you praise them or you make them feel good. That's why your example is wonderful. How many times do we squander the opportunity at home, or in our classroom, or in our work environment? It's wonderful.
And about a husband and wife, especially. Reb Chaim Vital, famous Reb Chaim Vital, that he says that the way a person is judged on their behalf is the way they act to their spouse. Many years ago, I said in Chazak, I said a speech on Shalom Bayis, I very much stressed this. So a person might think, but chesed with your spouse? But I mean, like, I'm away the whole day, she's at home, or she's away the whole day, we come home, we see a little bit. A few compliments, that's the greatest chesed you could do for each other, is to show the person that you think highly of them.
Now you've become, I'm going to call you an ambassador of some sort in teaching chesed. Where did, just share a little background, where did that come from? Where did you grow up, first of all?
So I would say 2 things to that question. First, I would say, my parents, always liked to help anyone that has a need. Like you know what I'm saying? My mother has a special thing of trying to make shidduchim for older singles. And hard cases. Hard cases. And she's made some real hard cases that, like, and she also likes to invite over. I grew up, like, this older, whatever, Bachar, this older, this comes for a Shabbos Suda, and they always liked to help people. My father and mother together, always looking out to help people. That's one thing. The second thing I would say is, I'll tell you something interesting. I got a phone call the other week. Someone just was saying he lives in Netanya, he listens to the Daily Dose of Chesed, and he's a Baal Tshuva from Florida, and he's whatever, he really enjoys it. Fine. So I asked him, how did you become from? I don't think I ever told you this, Rabbi Yitzchak. This happened just last week. He said, you know how I became from? Because someone gave me an ArtScroll Chumash. And I started learning Chumash. And I started learning Torah. I felt the Torah, the Chumash, the Mefarshim. I felt it was speaking to me. That's really how I became from learning. And he said now, he has real estate, he lives in Netanya. He liked the water, he used to live in Florida. So he lives by Netanya there, but he has real estate in the United States, but he lives in Eretz Yisrael. And
so he called you because he heard one of the daily
dose of Chesed. And he says he listens to them in Netanya, and he sends the Chesed podcast back to Florida, to people. He said, I want you to know that we're listening in Netanya, in Florida. That's what he was calling to tell me. Fine. But really, I want to say something. This point that he got me thinking. He says, from learning Chumash, I became from. The more you learn Chazal and Gemaras, you see how Chesed is a key. From learning Torah, the Gemaras are all over the place. What should you do to be saved from Chavli Mashiach? You should toil in Torah and Gemilas Chasadim. People are Rahman al that have certain sorrows. It says Bnei Eli had klolis on them. What should you do? Yasik b'Torah, toil in Torah and Gemilas Chasadim. The Gemara always puts this together. You have to toil in Torah and Chesed.
And it's one of the things that you've commented on in your Shiurim, the Lashon HaGemara of Yasoik. The Yasoik is going on both. Yasoik b'Torah.
This is the Chavetz Chaim's
diak. That it's an immersion. You have to
be immersed in it.
Right.
And this is one of the things I come to say. In fact, I started off the book in the introduction with that, is that the Chavetz Chaim told people that there's no other way to be saved. Every time when sorrows are happening, he says, already before, in his time, before World War II, he was saying that already Chavli Mashiach, it's the onset of Chavli Mashiach, we're coming close to the year 6000. He said already in his time, it was already the onset of Chavli Mashiach. So the Chavetz Chaim said that you're wasting your time going around, what could we do for protection? The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Tzadik Ches that the only protection from Chavli Mashiach is in being immersed in Torah and Chesed. So that's what I bring out, that people could say that immerse myself in Torah, I understand how to do that. How do you immerse yourself in Chesed if you have a 9-to-5 job, and then when you run home, you have to run to your chavrusa and run to eat supper and do homework with your kids? How could you be constantly toiling in Chesed? The answer is, if you just drop 5 compliments throughout the day and give one person a lift, you just did massive Chesed the whole day. It's just a mindset.
It's a reprogramming.
It's just a reprogramming.
Right? Yeah.
In the book that we write is that how can a person think to compliment? How can they think? Once you get it into your head, this is a mitzvahs asay deraisa of chesed. This will protect me from Chavli Mashiach. So why should I not compliment? Just I'll tell you something. Today I davened in a minyan, and someone davened a beautiful hal, Rosh Chodesh. And I was like bothered. The guy davened really nice, and I didn't see anyone compliment him. I'm saying, someone davened a nice halal. If someone will just internalize, it's a mitzvah deraisa to say, I enjoyed your davening, you're a beautiful Baal Tefillah. Then if a person internalizes that it's a mitzvah deraisa, then why? It doesn't cost anything.
Beautiful. And it costs you nothing.
It costs you nothing, and it's the greatest chesed, and it's the greatest protection. So
it's a chiddush that this hasn't been brought out more, I'll be honest. When I went through the book, when I went through the manuscript before it was published, I kept saying to myself, you're not being machadish. You're saying dvarim pshutim. You're saying things that are so obvious, like you said before. Open mamari chazal. You're not reinventing the wheel. Right. You're shining a light on something that needed to be magnified in a greater way, and you do it magnificently. Now, I noticed before you skirted my question, because I know you don't like talking about yourself, but I just want to hear for our viewers a little background about you. I know you don't like talking about yourself. I know you want to talk about the book, and you're all about spreading the Chesed message, which we'll get back to. But just tell us a little about yourself. Where did you grow up? Where did you learn?
Okay, so I learned Actually, I learned in elementary school, I learned in Chaim Berlin, and I loved it.
So you grew up in Flatbush?
I grew up in Flatbush, and it was gewaldic. The Chaim Berlin elementary years, I have like real fond memories. Then I went to Torah Tamima. From then on, from starting 9th grade, Rabbi Landau I was privileged to have as a Rebbe, through Rabbi Shlomo Feivel, and then I went to ArtScroll to learn the brisk, and then I came to Lakewood, and that's my background. I say shiurim and halacha, and I say for the Lunch and Learn program.
In Lakewood as well.
In Lakewood as well, the Lunch and Learn program.
Is your topic always around about Chesed?
No. So the Lunch and Learn, that's available on Torah anytime. It's 9 out of 10 shiurim are on halacha. 9 out of 10 shiurim are on halacha. But at the last 3 or 4 minutes of this halacha shir, which is only 27 minutes, the whole shir, the last 3 or 4 minutes, we usually say something in Yonei Agoda or something. And usually that's about Chesed. Now, one time I made a special series of 4, that CD, which was also which was also called Living Chesed.
Very popular, right? It was called Living Chesed.
And it was also called Living Chesed. And that was on, that I made a special thing. I gave 4 shiurim in a row.
And that series of Living Chesed is what really spurred me to push you to write this book. And whoever didn't hear those shiurim, it's worth getting hold of. Is there a way to get hold of them?
I could, if someone contacts me,
someone contacts you, those shiurim are really, I'm not exaggerating, they're life-changing. First of all, your delivery is magnificent. You have, everything is documented in Chazal, and you have fantastic stories, which is really what you do in this book.
Right, but this book has really, the stories here, each time we bring the Chazal to point, we give a fascinating story, and most of these stories are not well known.
Right, you did a great job, we would call curating the stories. Walk us through, how do you go about collecting stories? I know as someone who tries to collect stories and tries to write, it's hard to find original stories. Most stories by now, everyone seems to know them. Some of them that you write are first-hand, so obviously they're original, but what's your process of collecting stories to be on message?
Okay, well, first of all, I have to tell you that since I've been speaking about Chesed and always mentioning stories on Chesed in my shiurim, even when I'm saying halacha shir, the last few minutes is usually about Chesed, so the end of the shir, you know what I'm saying? So I've been always on the lookout for good stories. And so when it came to this thing of writing a book, in other words, a bunch of the stories were already, we're going to make the podcast, say the Chesed stories. I had these stories for years in my memory that I'm like, this story I heard once from Rabbi Meir Shachter on a thing. This I once heard from Rabbi Nov, it's years ago. This story happened 20-something years ago, I remember in Lakewood. These things, because it was so precious to me, every Chesed story, so I've had them in me for many years. A lot of them I didn't have to search. A lot of them was now I'm going to take a lot of these stories, and a lot of them are not well known. And it's interesting, like this Rambam that we spoke before about a compliment, that it's not a well-known Rambam.
Right.
I've said it over, I would almost say hundreds of times already. And I remember, like when 9/11 happened, people know where they were when they heard about it.
Right.
I remember where I was driving when I heard Ramatas Yod Salman say over from a schmoozing gate to this before he came to Lakewood. When he said over this Rambam. I remember I was driving in Baltimore. I remember where I was driving.
Wow.
What an impression that shook me that the compliment is mitzvah deraisa. So basically, these stories, Chesed stories, always made a very big impression on me. So you're saying like
so you started building up almost like a treasure, trove
without writing them down. I just had them. You know, these were stories that I had with me that I, you know.
Would you say that hearing that Rambam was what sparked your Chesed revolution? You know, was that it?
It's hard to say. I don't know. I can't answer that. If it sparked my Chesed, I can't say.
Your cheshek to speak about it, and
I don't know. I can't answer an honest answer to that. But I can say that when it hit me that the Rambam is saying that this is the ultimate way to do Chesed, it hit me on a new, like a ton of bricks.
Sure.
That the greatest Chesed is available to, like, you know. And one of my podcasts that I put out, the topic was how to be the greatest husband, and the whole thing was less than 4 minutes. And like someone was saying, how could you do that in less than 4 minutes? Well, it was the greatest Chesed is to compliment your wife. That was this Rambam. That's the greatest Chesed.
Right.
Make your wife feel appreciated. Stiepel writes in a letter that a husband or wife that feels not appreciated by their spouse, it's like pikuach nefashos. So that's a good question. It definitely spurred me to a new degree how chesed is so accessible and so easy.
Right. And if people would realize the power of compliments, especially from people who are good at what they're complimenting you about. For example, I think of two people, let's say Rabbi Krohn, Sein Gesund, and Rabbi Spiro. Both of them are very generous with compliments. I know to me, they always have a nice word to say. And they're at the top of their field. If people would realize that in whatever position they're in, they could really build people and spur them on to further growth. It's an unbelievable
And I will
thing.
add one thing, that we're talking about compliments, that it's a mitzvah deraisa and how special, how it builds people up. But of course, and we explained that in the book a few times, you have to have a good dose of seichel also. How to say the compliment, a compliment that's on mark.
Right.
The person doesn't just think you're saying, oh, great, great, great for everything. It has to be done with seichel.
It has to be genuine.
It has to be right. It has to be real.
Has to be real.
But everybody has something real to compliment.
Right.
Everyone has something real. So if you're going to compliment your wife on the steak that was burned to toast, so it's not real.
It's silly.
It's silly. That's silly.
Right.
But everybody has good things.
I'm telling you, people read this book, they're going to walk away, guaranteed, they're going to look at their daily interactions differently. There's no other way about it. You read this book, even a few chapters, and suddenly you start thinking to yourself, hold on, everything I do in my day, from the moment I wake up and meet the first person and I wish them good morning, till I go to sleep at night, I'm going to encounter so many opportunities. And it's really unbelievable.
I sometimes enjoy telling people, if I give a bacher a hitch, one or two bachrim a hitching, so I once gave 3 bachrim a hitch, I told them, that I'm doing 3 mitzvah deraises with this car ride. I said, yeah. And they said, well, which mitzvah? They're like, boy, we got to get that word out there to more drivers, so we can get some more hitches.
Right.
But a person looks at it like that. Now, you're not obligated to go out of your way if your wife is waiting for you, your children are waiting for you, you have a chavrus, so you have obligations you have to do. But if a person has this mindset, if I go 5 blocks out of the way for someone, I'm doing a mitzvah deraisa. It's like I'm opening the Aron Kodesh by Ne'ilah.
Right.
I'm doing a mitzvah,
It's no less than your $250 esrig, right?
Right.
Now, you're a master of stories. You have great stories. People love stories. I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't know if you could think of what are 1 or 2 of your favorite chesed stories?
So it's a thing. A lot of people ask me that, and I don't mind telling you a story. I could sit there and tell a lot of stories, but it's very hard for me to say what's my favorite story.
Okay.
I knew that question was going to be coming because I've been asked it more than once. It's very hard for me to say what's my favorite because I feel there's so many different stories that each one bring out the point in a different way. They're each special. They're each special. But I will tell you something interesting. That what I find about chesed, that we're talking about building someone up, right? How it's literally like life-changing. You mentioned that story with Rav Shach. Rav Shach said a line, and it's one of the times, when I went over with my editor in the book, we didn't want to make too many things bold, because if you start making bold every chapter, something bold.
By the way, let me use that opportunity to thank the editor, Mrs. Chana Nesselbaum.
She did an incredible job.
She did an unbelievable job.
She took every written page, exactly like I wrote in the acknowledgments. She took every written page and took that page and made it into a masterpiece. Hashem gave her such a special talent, and she uses it. She was telling me that, the things that she uses the talent to be marbe kvod shemayim.
Oh, she did. She did a magnificent job. So getting back, I'm sorry, I interrupted your story.
Yeah. So this story, there's a couple of different points, but what I mentioned right before that was about making bold. So Mrs. Nesselbaum didn't want I should make bold too many things in the book because she said it loses its effect. If every chapter you have something
like the
bold.
boy who cried wolf.
Right. So we only did bold 3 times. One is an introduction, this Rambam, about the compliment. That's the ultimate way to do the mitzvah deraisa of chesed. Now, the second time, Mrs. Nesselbaum was very touched by something, and she made this bold by herself. And I don't have permission, but I will tell you something. just to show how she took to heart this thing. She said this halacha was so eye-opening to her, straight halacha and Shulchan Aruch, she discussed it with her children, and her son got together and they actually took an action from this halacha. That is, that the halacha is that you're obligated, for halacha and Shulchan Aruch, to give tzedakah to your relatives first. And it gives a list in Shulchan Aruch. And the Vilna Gaon holds that it's a chiyuv midoraisa. First you have to help out your parents, then your married children, and then your brothers and sisters. Which means to say that if anybody has, I wasn't planning on going to the tzedakah aspect, it's only like 1 or 2 pieces on this, but you mentioned Mrs. Nesselbaum, how she was taken by this. That means if anyone has brothers or sisters that can't pay their tuitions, you're obligated, midoraisa, to give first to help them pay their chayvus of tuitions before you give to any parlor meetings, to any yeshivas, to any other great, any other great causes. Mm-hmm. You got to help out. So she was so taken by this that she mentioned this to her son and they got together and they gave all their maisa money to help out one of their relatives that needed, that had some chayvus.
Wow.
They said
now you yourself have shared with me, stories of people who have picked up the phone, called up a school, and asked.
There's a few great stories in the book about this.
First-hand stories that you know.
First-hand stories. One of them, now that we're talking like a conversation, one of them things I heard directly from the school secretary, which was my daughter, who got this phone call, and the person anonymously just to take care of the tuition burdens
of siblings,
relatives, of siblings, siblings' children, and that's really the highest. This is the highest tzedakah.
Wow.
That's the second time it was bolded. It was on this halacha that she did.
Okay.
The third time I bolded, I asked her permission to bold one more time, and she gave me permission to bold one more thing, and that is this thing. There's towards the end of the book, I have a few fascinating stories, which here I have to be very careful not giving out. These are all stories that I know really firsthand, basically from through this, through that, friends of whatever. I know really stories, but this thing, like what you said, were Rav Shach, what you started mentioning before. The story was that Rav Rafi Wolf, he was a very close mashamish of Rav Shach. So he was there when a bacher came into Rav Shach, and he asked Rav Shach that the world stands on 3 things: Torah, Avoida, and Gemilas Chasad. Torah, I learn in yeshiva. Avoida, I daven. I don't do chesed. So like you mentioned before, he wants to go play music. He's a talented musician. He wants to go to an old age home and play some music. So the story, how I like to bring it out is, and this is what I wrote. Rav Shach got upset because Rav Shach's point was like this. Rav Shach said, I know what's going on in yeshivas. There are bachim that are depressed. There are bachim that don't feel part of the clique. They're having trouble. To take 5 or 10 minutes out of your time, of your supper time, and shmooze with a bacher that's feeling out of it, that is the greatest chesed. Not just making someone happy, playing a little music for them. To take a boy that feels lost in a school, lost in a class. So the way I brought it out in the book was, it's like imagine someone, I'll tell you which line I made bold in a minute. That's imagine somebody is sitting in a hospital, and he's in the ICU, in intensive care. And he says, I really want to go visit someone sick. Maybe I should walk to the pediatrician's office and visit someone who has strep throat. Like, hello? You want to go? You're in the ICU. You want to visit a sick person? You're in the ICU. I said, it's almost like saying, this is what I bolded. To a girl that doesn't have friends in school, on a Sunday when all her friends are going out and having a great time. I wrote a real story about this. That girls that are going out having a great time on Sundays, and this girl is sitting home feeling alone. That's ICU level chesed. This was I bolded, that line. This is ICU level chesed. Greater than going to a nursing home and playing music. Is to give that girl friendship. That could literally save her life. That's a matter of life and death. So this is something there's a lot of stories about this, real first-hand stories about girls who just who took another girl in, who made it their business. And I'm not going to tell you, I preach this, without going into, preach this to a lot of people that are relatives of mine, people that I know, whoever has a popular son or popular daughter, I give them this message. Tell them they have an achrayus. If they're popular in school, there's a lot of stories out there in this book addressed to people that are popular kids. If Hashem gave you that matana of being popular. Use it that when the 5 girls or 5 boys want to do something on a Sunday or do something on a Bein Hazmanim, you tell them, I'm insisting that we take along this other girl also. And when you're popular, you could carry that weight because they want you. Right. You're like the life of the party. So they'll listen to you. So that's your achrayus to make sure they don't get left out. There's a lot in there. And in fact, it's also in there, that Gemara. Sometimes there's nothing stronger than a Gemara. Chayni HaMagal. Everyone's aware that Chayni HaMagal fell asleep for 70 years. But what happened when he woke up after 70 years? Since no one recognized him, the Gemara in Tainis, right? Mrs. Nesselbaum was saying this Gemara in Tainis, like it was going into her head from editing it. Right? It was 23a. She says, I remember it's 23a. I remember that. Tainis 23a. Chayni HaMagal's a Tana. And he said he would rather die because no one was giving him the respect anymore. A Tana. Someone who we can't imagine. But since people were not giving him the respect, the covet, we're not giving him respect anymore, he felt he'd rather die. That shows that respect for a person is a matter of life and death. It's not like I always tell the people this marshal. I like to tell kids when I'm giving Bachrim or girls when I spoke this in Oros High School. I spread a speech in Oros High School, and I spoke so powerful, so passionate about this, that I said it was right before Yom Kippur. I said it was the day before Erev Yom Kippur. I said, you want to make sure you're going to have a Gemar Chesima Taiva? Everyone sitting in this auditorium, make sure that now, when you're standing on Yom Kippur, davening to Hashem for a good year, think, I'm going to make sure when we do something, when we have a Chanukah Masib in a couple of months from now, I'm going to make sure to include those less popular girls. I'm going to make sure, if I'm in charge of it, I'm going to make sure to bring them with me on Sundays when we go out. I said, this will guarantee you a great year, better than anything else you can do. Because kol ha-merachem al habriyos, merachem alav min hashamayim. If you have rachmanos on them, Hashem will rachmanos back on you. This is what gets me the most passionate about, this. So going back to this thing with Chayni HaMagal, that Chayni HaMagal said either I'll die, he couldn't either. And when he says oy chavrusa amisusa, Rashi says either I have a friend that gives me respect, because Lashon HaGemara is yukara, respect, or else I'd rather die. This is exactly what the Alter from Slobodka used to say, that if a person feels that he's worthless, his neshama would depart from his guf, he would drop dead. Because a person who has no respect, feels no one thinks good of him, that's why they're depressed laying in bed, because they're not getting any friendship. So I like to tell this, I like to bring out when I speak to boys, to teenagers, or girls. I tell them as follows. I say, imagine you're standing on a street and it's pouring rain. And there's cars passing by and no one's giving you a hitch. Now, the person gives you a hitch, they did a mitzvah deraisa of chesed. You feel very bad that you didn't get a hitch. Is it going to enter your mind that if I have to walk in the rain, I'd rather die? No. Imagine a wife who can't get supper ready one night. Is she going to feel like, because I don't have supper ready, I'd rather die? No. No normal person will think like that. But yet the Gemara is saying, and the Outlet Slabodka is amplifying it, that if a person feels that they have no friends, they would rather die. So this is the greatest chesed. This is the ICU level chesed to show them friendship. And if one person this will affect from the book, it's worth it.
Listen, you reframed the way people look at chesed. And this is something that's mentioned in the foreword and then mentioned throughout the book. That you don't have to be the head of a colossal global organization like Chai Lifeline or Bnei Olam and so on to do genuine chesed. And you're helping the individual is not on a lower level. It's that level of supreme chesed. And what a book. What a book. You've done an unbelievable job. It is so geschmack to read. It is broken down into, about 103 chapters, right?
And I would say it's 103 chapters, and I would say there's a couple hundred stories, because there are many chapters that have
multiple stories.
Multiple stories.
And the chapters are short enough. I would mention that it's perfect for a Rebbe or teacher in a classroom if they need a daily lesson. This book is tailor-made for that, and it's very down to earth. So I think it's great for.
And I will go back again to what you said. Ms. Nesselbaum gets a lot of credit. How she had the skill to make it very easy to read.
Baruch Hashem,
She
she's
did
a
a
master.
magnificent
She's a
job.
master at what she
Yeah,
does.
and making it very easy to read.
I would say for Rabbonim, for drushes, it's fantastic, and really for any individuals, whether for Shabbos table, if people want a book that's light in terms of how it reads, but that's so filled with teichin and quality reading, this is it.
It's very light. Baruch
It is.
Hashem, it is light.
Which I think is a kunst, because you're
Yeah.
writing about a very substantive topic, which somehow, a book could get dragged down. You're talking about it's very important. It's
And
important.
that's why it's
topic.
also important that each piece is short.
Right.
Because, we tried very hard to keep pieces short, that you can read each piece by itself.
Right.
So,
I would ask you when Volume 2 is coming out, even though I know you're just catching your breath on Volume 1. I want to make a recommendation. I think that, I'm going to say this here first, I think a youth version of this book, whether for kids or for youth, would be very popular. I don't know if you thought about that yet.
In fact, my mechutin, Rabbi Pertinsky, who's a manal in Lakewood Cheder for the younger grades, right? So I gave him one as a gift, and he called me up and says, you give me so much material of stories that I could do to young kids.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe that is an idea.
So maybe that is an idea.
It's really wonderful. Thank you for the time that you put into this book. I would call it a sefer, really. I just don't want to scare people off, because it's a sefer, but it's very easy reading.
Right, that's what we were going back and forth with Mr. Nesselbaum. We didn't know, should we call it story number 1, lesson number 1, share number 1, because it's a story that has a lesson.
Right.
So we just left it neither. We just numbered
The way you did it was perfect.
Yeah.
And you should continue to be matzliach.
And I want to take the opportunity again to thank you, because bottom line is, if you wouldn't have kept on persisting, I'm telling you, you got to put it in writing. You got to put it in writing. You got to put it in writing. That's what,
Thank you for that. Thank you for your yedidus. I'll be honest. I shept nachas from what you did, and I felt that the world needed it, and the world is a better place because of this book.
Okay. I hope so.
In Mitzvah Hashem, many people should benefit from it. You should continue
Amen.
with your wonderful habatzas hatayra and the tremendous chizuk that you give to people.
Amen. And I'll just add on that the same way you were mechazik me with this book, you should be mechazik many more authors.
Amen. Thank you again. And thank you for coming down for this conversation.
My pleasure.